So I titled this Ethics in Production because that's what shines through to me, is the ethics behind production, and there's a lot, and it can be any kind of production, radio production, TV production. In this case, we're talking about TV production, movie production, but really there's ethics involved in production, and this speaks to me personally because I've been a PA on a TV show, reality and non-reality, and so I've kind of seen firsthand the ethical decisions that a lot of the producers have to make. Before I dive into the case, let's talk about the nature of the circumstance. What in society led us to this case? Well, we're dealing with the documentary TV show here. But what's the line between reality TV and a documentary? Do they bleed together? I think they do. Even if it's a hardcore news investigation, taking something and making it publicized will change the story. Making people's lives and turning them into stars will change them. Once you're a household name, there's really no going back, regardless of what your show is. Look at Honey Boo Boo. Her show is a reality show, but it's essentially a documentary. I mean, cameras just follow her around. Granted, her show is for entertainment, and it's a little scripted, but still, it's a documentary. They follow her around, they document her life. I mean, there's no way around it. They bleed together. I mean, we'll get into more of how they're different, but at the same time, they're similar. They take on similar roles, but one thing we're going to look at is the ethics and how ethics are different. And we're also going to talk about subjectivity and objectivity. Can a documentary be completely subjective, or is it more objective? It really depends, and we're going to talk about how that shapes and takes form later. But there's your nature and your circumstance. Let's dive into the case. Filmmaker David Sutherland takes us deep inside the passionate yet troubled marriage of Janetta and Daryl Broach-Keeper. I can't say their last name. It's pretty difficult. A young farm couple in rural Nebraska facing the loss of everything they hold dear. Now, doesn't that sound interesting? I got that from, that's just kind of the description about it. It's on PBS's website. It's on David Sutherland's website. So let's take a look at this real fast.
I met Daryl when I was just barely 16. I sat down on the tailgate next to him of his pickup, and we just started playing footsie.
She was everything I was ever looking for, you know. If you wanted a perfect farm wife and a perfect mother, you could see it when she was in high school. She's my everything, you know.
From filmmaker David Sutherland comes the epic story of an American family. Filmed over 3 years in rural Nebraska, it traces the struggles of Daryl and Juanita Bushcutter as they strive to wrestle a living from the land.
We had a hell of a good farm operation build up until about 1988 when the drought hit us.
In '91, the bank sent us a letter saying they were ready to liquidate our operation.
This is the story of how the battle to save their farm becomes a battle to save their marriage.
What's wrong with me right now? What's unbearable about me right now? We don't agree on everything.
I can see anger all over your face, just and you roll your eyes and everything else. It's just typical every night. Am I wrong? Smile. A real one, see?
I'm sorry.
So now you have a feel for kind of what the show is like, and pretty much you can grasp this case a little bit better. But let's talk about who's involved. So you have a filmmaker, David Sutherland, and I looked at his website, and he's done a lot of stuff and a lot of good stuff, and he's a pretty good filmmaker. And he really wasn't up and coming at the time when he made the film. It wasn't like this was his big break. He already had a couple films already. Plus, if you're going to have the funds to fund a project like this for 3 years, that's a lot of money and a lot of manpower. So usually beginning and starting out directors don't get that kind of break. So he wasn't an upcoming filmer. He shot other films. He shot a film called Country Boys and a show about a single mother in South Dakota. So he kind of likes showing small town America, it seems like, which is interesting. He wanted to showcase America, and that's kind of his goal, the goal of his films. He wanted to showcase the hardship of the heartlands. He seems to have that theme throughout his work. And he wanted to paint a picture. According to him, he's a portraitist, and that's what he does. He doesn't really have an agenda. He's not asking for change. He's not showing something that people will get offended by, which plays a lot into this case as well, as it's not very a touchy subject for most people. Granted, it is a little bit about poverty, but still, it's not really the heart of the matter. For him, he's not a journalist, he's an artist. Next, you have the farmer's wife, more specifically, Janetta and Daryl and their 3 daughters. They live in Nebraska on a farm, and they're going through a lot of hardships. They work hard, and they barely get by. I mean, he followed them around for 3 years. And so, and after this film was over, their lives were forever changed. And I'll talk more later about that kind of effect on stuff like this. But basically, you know, they were just simple farmer folks, and then the show aired, and they became famous. They became known to a lot of people and known about their situation. And next, you have the audience. You have the people who saw this and reacted to it. And that's pretty much, that's important to any TV show, is, do people watch it? Let's talk about the ethics involved in this film and production. The point of a documentary is to document someone's life, and it's usually a hardship or someone going through something or just something unusual. It's usually after they appear on TV, their life gets turned around because people are willing to help them, or they get a nice chunk of cash from doing it. Most people don't get paid for doing documentaries, but some do, depending on the gravity of the documentary. Or, you know, people also pay them to make appearances. So I would say that you get some notoriety from doing a documentary. It definitely changes your life. Some people, it changes their life a lot, and others it's still minuscule, but nevertheless still change. David Sutherland created this portrait of this farm family, and however, after that aired, the family changed. There wasn't the same story. It wasn't the same family as you saw them. Going through something like this changes your story, and that's my first question. By publicizing someone's life, does it change their story and destroy the original intent? So David's original intent was to capture this family and their story and almost preserve it, but at the same time, you know, once he preserves that story, he changes it, and let alone just filming it changes the story in some way as well. So I think it does kind of, depending on what your original intent is, but I think it's almost like you're sealing in someone's story, but then afterwards it's going to drastically change. So I don't know if that's something that David Sutherland thought about, but he created this picture in this family, but at the same time, he changed their story. He got to lock in their story and through video, but at the same time, it's going to be different now. If he went back and did another documentary about them, their life would be completely different. It wouldn't be the documentary he set out to make. I think that news doesn't get wiggle room. Documentaries get a little bit of wiggle room, and I'll talk more about what I mean by that with enhancement in a second. And I think reality TV shows get a lot of wiggle room. I think that they can really do what they want because they're entertainment. And that brings me to enhancement. What's too much enhancement? I mean, going back to production, I think enhancement is an important ethical decision. It's powerful. It can drive people to take action. Anything that drives people to take action is important. Is it right to make your message more than it really is? Is it? This is hard for. I think people have the right to convey their message, and they have the right to do it in a most powerful and effective way that they can possibly do. It comes down to truth. When does enhancement, blur those lines and become a lie? Editing can create different contexts, and editing, I think, is the biggest form of enhancement, and it can really change things around and make people look bad, make people look good. And sometimes enhancement can be like over-promising, like those old kid commercials where they have action figures that are really flying around because they can make it look like they're really flying around. And I think that's important to consider is what's almost over-promising. The camera's a powerful tool, and producers need to always be aware of that and always consider the decisions behind that. So let's talk about the impact of the film. Most of the reviews call this film refreshing. This came out right before reality TV started really going downhill, or even the whole kind of entertainment reality TV got started. So I think it's hard for people not to look back and like it because they're looking back on something good, as opposed to now a lot of that stuff out there isn't good. So it's kind of a gem, I guess, if you will. Robert Nielsen of the Omaha Herald wrote, "The stuff of epic fiction. Strong, passionate protagonists with shared dreams." And I thought that was interesting because this was the Omaha Herald, so this is where the film took place. So I feel like that's always important when national news, what the hometown paper's writing about it. And then Julia Keller of the Columbus Dispatch wrote, "The most talked about event of public television from 1998 to 1999." So it was pretty talked about. The Associated Press wrote, "Intense, heartbreaking, and beautifully produced." So that goes back to production and people just being aware that this is produced and that a lot goes into the production and a lot of thing goes into the decisions that they made, and the decisions they made, the ethical decisions, really could have took the film to different places and made it better, made it worse. I think in this case it could have made it a lot worse. And the only really bad stuff I could find was on Amazon reviews, and it was just one person complaining that it was too long. The film actually inspired people in different ways. It inspired this one person that I read on his blog.